Rear Admiral Chatfield has responded to a series of questions surrounding the proposed firing range at the Northwest Field. In a letter from Senator Frank Ogun Jr., the senator's letter compiled questions that weren't fully answered during a roundtable discussion held on October 5th.
Joint Region Marianas Commander Rear Admiral Chatfield has responded to questions about things like excess federal lands, the choice to put the proposed firing range at the Northwest Field, access to private property, and the types of chemicals that will be left behind by spent ammunition. Senator Frank Ogun Jr. compiled a list of questions that weren't fully answered by military officials during a roundtable discussion held at the legislature on October 5th. The senator promised to follow up on these questions, so he wrote a letter to the Rear Admiral with the list of questions attached. Today, the senator released the response he received from the Rear Admiral. One of the questions asked was how DoD was able to get property like Anderson South and South Finnegodzin back into their coffers after it was returned, quote, through GSA by the Ancestral Lands Commission, end quote. Rear Admiral Chatfield's response was that the properties in question were actually subject to the GUAM Excess Lands Act, which requires that final disposition of the lands be subject to a federal agency utilization screening before transfer to the government of Guam. Andy South and South Finn were retained by the federal government as a result of this screening. Another question asked was, who were the 13,000 individuals mentioned who did not want the live fire range in Pauget and instead wanted the range in the Northwest Field? Chatfield's response was that the 13,000 people who signed a petition by the Community Advocates for the Raceway, or CAR organization, were in essence signing a petition that says no to the range at Pauget, but yes to having the range at the Northwest Field. There was also a question about denying access to original landowners at Hanapson, Arunau, and Ritidian. DoD's response was that, quote, the Marine Corps relocation does not propose any access restriction to private property, end quote. Instead, there will be, quote, only partial restrictions up to 39 weeks a year to those publicly accessible federal jurisdiction areas of the Ritidian unit of the Guam National Wildlife Refuge, end quote. Another question was about the kind of chemicals that will be left behind by spent ammunition and how DoD was planning on disposing of this ammunition. For the specific types of ammunition and chemicals that could be left behind, DoD directed the public to the 2010 Final Environmental Impact Statement. As far as disposing of ammunition, DoD says the Navy will develop range-specific standard operating procedures, which will include procedures for range clearance. This could include clearing the range every 5 years. Another question was about the risk of lead dust from the ammunition. Chatfield's response is that these risks were analyzed under the 2015 final SEIS, which found that the great distance of residence and Guam's high average rainfall resulted in insignificant impacts from lead dust, end quote. In addition, there will be bioswales and water quality basins to, quote, help reduce the likelihood of lead dust migration into the aquifer, end quote.
And to see the full list of questions and DoD's response, log on to thepacificnewscenter.com.